Well, hello there, all of you little yarn goblins and fiber trolls, and welcome back to another episode of Flannel and Pod. My name is Christopher. I am Flannel and Pearls, and please come on in, take a seat. I know, it's been a while.
It's been 84 years.
I thought I was going to get an episode out in April. I really did. I had every intention of doing so. I had one all written out. I had all of my little notes made. I was ready to do it, and the time just got away from me. The entire month just seemed to slip by because there's only so many hours in a day, and a lot of my time was dedicated to other projects, one of which I get to tell you about today. But you know what? Maybe I'll film it anyway someday, and we'll pretend like it's in the past, and I'll like put it all in black and white, and I'll put some grain over the top of the film, and we'll have some very, very soft, mysterious and romantic film noir music that plays over the top, and I'll have a lit cigarette in my hand the whole time that I don't actually ever smoke.
He's looking at you, kid.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. I don't know when that's gonna happen, but that's gonna be a thing. But it's not going to be today, because today is a very special episode. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing something a little hooty, a little crazy, because I want to talk to you about the Tour de Fleece, which, for those of you who are on Instagram, for those of you who are on Patreon, you know that I am on a spinning journey right now. I am in my Baba Yaga, Bog Witch realness, Laura Ingalls Wilder era, and I feel magical about it. I have an e-spinner. I have a treadle wheel that I need to introduce you to, and I'm just spending my evenings with my feet they're just going pit-a-pat. They're just going pit-a-pat while the wheel goes around, and I am just spinning my fiber. I am actually the pioneer woman. Sorry, Ree. Is that her name? Ree Drummond? Is that right? Pioneer woman?
I'm Ree Drummond.
Anyway, I'm the pioneer woman, and I am loving the experience of learning to spin. It feels as though the craft has no end to it. The well has no bottom, it never runs dry, and as soon as I feel like I have figured one thing out, there are 16 more to dive into. It's so rich and dense, and it has history attached to it. It's everything that I look for in a craft. And one of the unexpected pleasures of this is that this year, I get to co-host my own team for Tour de Fleece. I am co-hosting it with Tashi over at Stitches and Starlight here on YouTube, and Tangles and Starlight over on Instagram. And originally my intention was just to sit down here. I was going to tell you all about my tools, my project, what we had planned for our little Tour de Fleece team. And then I realized, y'all may not know Tashi. I just assume that everybody knows Tashi because Tashi is one of my favorite people. I talk about them on this channel almost every episode, and so I just assume that everybody knows them, but I'm realizing perhaps you don't. And sure, I could sit here and I could talk about them for probably a solid hour, but what good would that be when I could instead invite them to the table and let them tell you all about themselves? So if you would, please give a big at-the-table welcome to Tashi. Hi, Tashi. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so glad to have you here. Sort of at the table. Sort of. It's like right there. It's like back behind me. You're sort of at the table. You're sort of at the desk. Welcome to the office, I guess is probably the best way of putting it. It's great to have you here. I'm so excited. I'm so thrilled to actually bring you into... I feel like you've kind of always been in this space. Like, to me, you've always been an integral part of this experience. You've been here definitely since the beginning of me starting my YouTube channel. And without question, you were one of the earliest supporters and have been hugely instrumental to me. Just sort of when it feels like this is too much, when it feels like this is very overwhelming, I know that we've had 1,000,001 conversations about how to make it easier, how to make it simpler, how to make it more joyful. And so it's actually it feels very natural, actually, for you to be here. And I'm absolutely delighted.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's
thank you.
So many nice things to be said about me at one time. I am verklempt. I am overwhelmed. I'm also your biggest fan. So it's all easy.
I hope so. I believe that there are probably people who are watching this right now who are probably ready to fight you over that title, which I'll watch that fight personally. I'm gonna be the hot person in the middle of the ring with the sign. that's just like walking in rounds. That's going to be my that's my thing. I have to, I think everyone knows you personally. That is my belief, is I think everybody knows you, but I can't operate on that assumption. And that is why one of the things that I'm so pumped to bring you into this is to introduce you to people that I think everyone should know you. And so it's great to do that. One of my favorite things about your channel, one of my favorite things about your video is your consistent and very you intro. And so for the people who don't know who you are, for the people who don't follow you yet or haven't seen any of your videos, would you do me the honor at the table, please doing your intro for me, because it is my favorite.
Well,
can you do it on demand? Is this too much? Am I putting you on?
No, I can. It's just very rare that I get it in one cut, but we are doing it. I'm ready.
We're going to try it. Here we go.
Whew. Hello, and welcome to Stitches and Starlight. My name is Tashiana, but you can call me Tashi because that's what all my friends do, and we're friends now. I'm coming to you from my home in Brooklyn that I share with my husband, Joshua, and the 2 hell kittens, actual cats, not humans, Minerva and Astoria, and technically this is not my channel, but anyways, this is where I talk about all the things that I'm knitting and spinning and sewing and potentially weaving. It is just fiber joy and wool chaos all the time. I'm inviting you to a space that I'm sharing with my delightful friend Christopher, but if this is the first time you've met me, thank you so much for clicking on the thumbnail. There are a million voices vying for your attention on the internet, and you saw whatever this is and decided to give it a go, and that makes you a rad human if you're a returning viewer, which, you know, you probably are because Christopher's amazing. Welcome back.
I love it so much. As someone who watched every episode of your Vlogmas, I was like, yes, because I watched it because you had posted it early in the morning, and you're on the East Coast, I'm in Central Time, and so you were always posting at like perfect time for me to wake up. And I would be, what a wonderful Christmas holiday treat to just like be grinding my coffee beans as the dulcet tones of Tashi's voice slowly entering my ears. It's just, it's such, thank you. And it so perfectly lines up exactly who you are. And that's what I love about it. It tells me everything that I need to know. My question is, we know that you spin. We know that you knit. We know that you sew. Sometimes you weave. Sometimes you weave. At this point, I would consider you a consummate YouTuber as well. At this point, my question is, what have we missed? Like, what else is there? What are you like? What else are you into these days? Like, what are you bringing in?
Well, as someone who discovered, this is not my first foray into YouTube. This is not my first YouTube channel. In the dark corners of the internet, my scrapbooking channel still exists. And that was my first foray into, I generally hate this term, but into content creation. And I use the scare quotes on purpose. But that was my first foray into making and any sort of like articulate making journey. I am primarily a storyteller, and I believe in living my life so that it is a collection of stories well told that someone else can then like pick back up and continue. Like I'm always thinking about how could I live authentically and tell a story that, one, I'm proud of, that 2, other people want to read, and 3, continues to inspire the people around me. And so that's part of why I picked up scrapbooking, is I was just like, ooh, I can actually write the things down that I'm like just percolating in the back of my head. And so it's not the thing that's at like the front of my interest these days, but it is something I still think about, and I still go back to it, and I still play with entirely too much paper, and I like ink, and I like stamps, and I like all that. I'm like a consummate hobby starter. And then
your hobby is hobbies.
Yes, no, my hobby is hobbies. That is 100% correct. And sometimes things stick, and sometimes I spend too much money and I hyperfixate for something to only last 6 months, and for me to go, oh no, I did it again. I scrapbooked for about 5 years. Put that down for a little bit to pick up knitting and spinning, and I've been knitting since I was about 14, and put it down, picked it back up, put it down, picked it back up multiple times. I have not, like, it was the Instagram knitting with like patterns and like sweaters and all that other stuff that like really like sucked me back in 2020. I started spinning in 2021, and the rest, they say, is history.
Wow. Okay. I want to talk about that for sure, but I am curious for someone you know how I feel about storytelling. Like I like that is I have quoted you on this channel. I've quoted you multiple times across Instagram. I quote you to your face all the time, as far as saying that you are a capital S spinner and a lowercase k knitter, which I love. I love that distinction because I happen to think that for most people who do craft, whatever that craft may be, whether it's embroidery or cross stitching or shaping things from, I have one person who watches the channel and she sends me videos of her at the table, and what she's doing is she's sculpting things out of like found objects, and she makes birdhouses and like interesting sculptures and things like that out of stuff that she finds around Seattle, which is it's one of those things that it's like, I wish I could do. Well, I mean, let me restate. I can do it. Anyone can do it. It's not a matter of skill. It's just a matter of like, I know it's not going to look anywhere near as good as what she's turning out. And so, but what I find really fascinating is that I feel as though individuals who craft, rarely do they do just one. It is oftentimes a Venn diagram of intersecting interests that all feed into one another, with yourself right there in the center. Like you are the conjoining piece of all of these disparate skills. The spinning and the sewing, the knitting, the weaving, all of these, they feel as though they kind of belong to the same family. Like they're all sort of a part of the same fiber craft umbrella of stuff. I'm curious, when it comes to scrapbooking, how do you feel scrapbooking informs your other crafting, and how does the other crafting inform the way that you look at scrapbooking now? Since that's how you, like, that was kind of like your jump into the world of I also despise the phrase content creation. We're gonna call it publishing. It's self-publishing, but we'll call it publishing. Since that was your first foray into it, how do those worlds inform one another, since they are kind of visually separate?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with my approach to all making. And I think that's part of the reason why I can like hop from craft to craft to craft and then figure out if there's a safe place for me to land, like interest-wise in any of them. My approach to scrapbooking was less what was aesthetically interesting, and at the time, scrapbooking is very different now than it was when I started. But at the time, the focus was on like ephemera and like as many things that you can put on the page as possible. And like the photo and the words were kind of secondary to the full-on vision of what you were making. And at the time that I came into it, there was this big shift in it, led by this person that I look up to greatly. Her name is Allie Edwards. Anyone who scrapbooks knows who Allie Edwards is. And I got lucky to build a solid relationship and build community with Allie while I was in that space. And Allie, one of the things Allie taught me was to start with story, was to always start with story. And if you start with story, even if you don't like the finished project, like even if you don't like the full view of the thing that you made at the end, if you start with story, the journey is what matters. And then sometimes you end up with something like really beautiful that you can put in an album, and it's like, but it is the experience and it's the story that matters. And so that informs all of the other making that I do. It's why it doesn't break my heart to not finish projects, because the project was the story. I started with a story that I wanted to tell. And maybe the story was working with a yarn that I had never worked with before. Maybe the story was learning a new technique that I hadn't known before. Maybe the story was doing it in community with a very dear friend of mine who, the amount of knit-alongs I start with people that I just phase out. We don't talk about them. But maybe the story was just knitting in community. Maybe the story was working with this fleece that brought me a lot of joy, that had me really in my body and really interested and really grounded. And so finishing the journey is not what's important to me. What's important to me is the story that I'm telling myself and the story that I'm telling with the project as I'm working on it. And it's why abandoned projects and a million whips and all those other things that give other makers a significant amount of anxiety doesn't really bother me, because every project for me is a story, and sometimes stories end before you have like a finished thing, and that's okay.
Sure. And I remember very distinctly I think that it was a part of, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it was a part of your Vlogmas series where you talked about your animosity, perhaps is the right word, or at the very least your conflict with the expression process versus product crafting. I think that was a Vlogmas, if I remember correctly.
It was.
And this is very similar to that. It's the idea of everything is a process. Every single time you pick up your craft, whatever the tools are of what you're working with at that time, if you're spinning and it happens to be a spindle, or if it happens to be a wheel or a spinner, if it is crocheting or knitting, if it's embroidery, it really doesn't matter. If you pick up the tools of your craft, at that moment you are engaging in the process, because every single stitch, every single knot, every single rotation of that wheel is another piece of that story that collects with you. And I love that idea. I'm a really big fan of doing away with these phrases that may or may not be helpful in reality. Like, I mean, really, when we delineate or designate rather the differences between process versus project, how is that helping? Who is that helping? What is it doing for the person who's actually creating the work?
Yeah, it's part of the reason why I make sure to make the designation that I am a capital S spinner, lowercase k knitter clear, because the amount of people who ask me what I'm going to do with my yarn, it's just like, well, why do I have to do with anything with it? Like, why is the yarn, like spinning the yarn was the story that I told. I have a finished skein of yarn on my shelf. That story is ended. Why do I have, there's something that I think people who, and I think I see it less often in people who are spinners, but I see it a lot in people who knit, where they just assume that spinning is to get you to the knitting. And no, spinning is to get me to the spinning, and I enjoy the spinning. And if it becomes something else, and that's why I tell people all the time, the yarn is the finished object. Like, I really am really interested in breaking that connection where the yarn is just a step to get you to a knit garment or a woven garment or a crochet garment, which is then the finished object. For me, the yarn is the finished object. If it then goes on to become something else, that is a new journey and a new story that I'm telling with it. But it is not inevitable or necessary for me, as evidenced by the piles of handspun I have lying around.
Which we won't talk about. I've seen photos, and I'm not going to put you on the spot like that because I care about your I care about your reputation, and we're going to be kind to you here.
Thank you.
And I'll just say that anytime you'd like someone to go shopping, I have a basket that I can bring to your apartment, and I'm more than happy to help you out with your hoard here a little bit. But I love this idea. You said something that really that's stuck with me. And I don't know if this is something that you say often, if it's something that you just, it flowed out of you naturally today. But this idea that each of these pieces, it's a matter of telling stories, that you start with the story, and that craft is in its nature, regardless of what it is, all of those pieces, they are a part of your story as a crafter. I love that sentiment. I think that that's so interesting. And it is so beautiful because it does allow us to also recognize that we change our interests. Our interests change over time. Our chapters flow. We have sections to this, the novels that our lives become. It's not even one book. Oftentimes it is volumes that are broken up by serious events that happen. And I think a lot of times, particularly when it comes to having any type of online presence, being anyone who is sharing their work publicly, whether that's on a large scale or a small scale, we lock ourselves into this idea that I'm doing this thing and this is what people know me for, so I should keep doing this thing. And it becomes very nerve-wracking, or even we sometimes lock ourselves in boxes of trying new stuff, of breaking outside of that mold and allowing ourselves to try new things. And with that, I mean, what I would love to, I would love to know more about, you said that you started knitting at 14. Where did this start? Did a family member teach you? Did you learn from a friend? What was what was your villain origin story when it came to knitting?
I love the idea of it being a villain origin story. I love that. That's what I'm calling it from now on. My mom, so I come from a really long line of creative women. Okay. I'm first gen. My parents are from Panama. And I grew up with my mom, like, baking cakes for weddings and sweet 16s. Oh my God, I have so many female cousins, and everybody had to have a sweet 16. And I am right in the middle. So I have like 9 people older than me, 9 people younger than me. Like, I am right in the middle. And all of my female cousins before me had to have sweet 16s, and I had to be on all of them, and I had to wear the stupid dress, and I had to do the thing. But we always made, like, the souvenirs. Like, they called them oh my God, there's the word in Spanish, and I'm not going to say it because I'm not going to out myself on the internet. But there's a word in Spanish for a thing that you like pin on your chest, and it's like a little souvenir that you take with you. So you get in there and it has like a little ribbon and it says the name of the person and like the event or whatever.
Okay.
And I spent most of my like early teens gluing things like this together. And so my mom and I used to routinely go to fabric stores to have to get the bits and pieces to make those things. And in the fabric store, there was always, and this wasn't like a Joann's fabric. This was very like a small, like mom and pop run operation on a corner of Flatbush Avenue. And there was always yarn in there. And I did not know what to do with it. So like she would be picking fabric and I would inevitably get bored and walk away by myself. And I started looking for things to do with the yarn because there were so many fun colors. There was all these fun gradients, all these other things. And I literally came home at the advent of the internet. I'm going to out myself. I'll be 34. So I grew up with the internet. All you Gen Z kids out there, you don't know. And I grew up with like...
I'm older than you, so it's okay. Out yourself. I'm older. It's all right.
I grew up with like dial-up and like having to like sit there and listen to the noise and wait for AOL to like cooperate. But I remember going home one day and just Googling, what do you do with yarn? And finding videos on knitting. And then went to the fabric store, grabbed like 2 skeins of like basic Red Heart acrylic yarn, and a set of like straight needles. I didn't even know circulars were a thing until I was like 29. Learned on basic straight needles. And this is one of the things that like, because I taught myself to knit, I still knit left to right, which some people say is knitting backwards. And I just say I knit left to right because I picked up my knitting needle in my dominant hand. It never occurred to me that there were knitting conventions and I should have learned to knit right to left. So I picked up my needle and I taught myself to knit left to right. I made a million terrible garter stitch scarves for my sister, which God bless her soul, she still has, in like awful acrylic yarn. And by awful, I mean like at this point it is ratty and it is barely holding itself together.
Yes.
And she still hand washes all of it. And I really need to like spin and knit something for my sister. Because if we want to talk about anybody who's knit worthy, she's knit worthy. And that's how I learned, just generating terrible strings of garter, like no real bind off, no gauge, no consistency. But and that's what I did. And I didn't know anything besides that because I didn't have patterns. I didn't have like, and I'm sure if I'd gone on YouTube and looked for more things, I could have, but I just kept knitting garter forever. And then I moved out and I stopped knitting. So I did it for like about...
Go ahead.
I did it till I was about 20 and then put it down and didn't pick it back up until 2020.
I feel like that's so many. There's such a commonality of the idea of I learned one thing and I just kept doing that one thing. That was the stitch that I could do. And that's I started out as crochet. I started crocheting when I was just a tiny little kid, and my grandma taught me. And for the very, very longest time, all I could do was just a chain. And so I would have a chain that was dozens of feet long. Because I didn't know how to like go back over the top of the chain and like create fabric. But you just keep doing the thing you do. I know how to do garter. I need to stop because anyone who is watching this probably saw the absolute abject confusion on my face. First of all, I have known you for a time now and had absolutely no idea that first of all, let's dispel the idea that it's knitting backward. That's not a thing, in my opinion. We knit the way that we need to in order for our hands and minds to operate the best. I just didn't know that you went from left to right. I didn't know this until this moment. I saw it all riveting to me. I find that so fascinating because it's one of those things, right, where you are so accustomed to doing something one way. I'm right-handed, and so I knit right to left. And so the idea of doing it backward, I'm like, of course it would work because it's just knots. It's just orientation of stitches. And so it's just the reverse. Like, of course it would work exactly the same. I just think I'm glad to know this now because imagine when we meet in person and I see you knit and I'm just like staring intently at your hands being like, what are you doing differently that I'm not doing? What is this? Now I can't wait to see it actually. That's it. So we have the entry point of a family of crafters, just this wonderful tradition of making. I love the idea of these little souvenirs. I'm little party favors for all of these events, and I love that they're handmade. I love that they were not purchased. I love that they were made. I knew exactly what you were talking about when you were talking about these small mom and pop craft shops, because the same thing exists in Chicago. Like these tiny, not chain, but small shops. When I first moved to Chicago, there was a fabric store that was just off of a train stop that was like 2 train stops down from me. And it is now, unfortunately, an LA Fitness, because that's how the world goes. That is, of course, what it became. But when I moved there for several years, it was one of those incredible fabric shops where it is floor to ceiling bolts. You're absolutely certain it's going to cave in and crush you at any moment. You don't want to move anything out of fear of encouraging that avalanche of fabric. But there is such a magic for those types of stores. And for anyone who is watching that has never experienced this, I hope that you get to. I understand that not everybody has access to that, but I hope someday, if you happen to be traveling to a major city, try to track down one of these stores. Even if you don't sew, even if you don't need fabric, even if you buy nothing. It is such a wonderfully unique experience that I think everyone should have, personally. But one thing I would love to know, so we get into 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. I don't think that we need to like put it to words. I think we all remember. I think we're all like still sifting through the trauma of that. So I think we can just say 2020 happened. So many people came back to crafting during 2020. So like during like the 2020, 2021, 2022, during that experience of I'm spending a lot of time indoors, or I am needing to spend time recovering from being out of my home during this experience, what was it in 2020 that like clicked? Like what snapped in your brain and was just like, yeah, I could pick these needles back up again. What's the gig?
I was straight out of nursing school at the top of 2020, like straight out of school.
Great time to do that.
Oh, for context, I'm a nurse. I'm operating on things, people knowing what I do for a living. I'm an OR nurse, and I was straight out of nursing school at the top of the pandemic. And that is a really interesting way to have your career start. It's just,
I can't imagine.
All I'm going to say about that. And I was barely holding it together. And I remember still in scrapbooking Instagram, which, you know, my scrapbooking Instagram is alive and well. I have not posted anything on it since June of 2022. I occasionally get DMs of people just going, are you ever going to come back? And I go, yes, eventually, leave me alone. I say it kinder than that, obviously. But I remember that a lot of my scrapbooking friends knit. And I just saw people like posting pictures of their knitting or like scrapbooking about their knitting, which I have done. It's probably the most meta thing that I've ever done, which is crafting about my crafting. I have multiple scrapbook layouts about spinning and multiple scrapbook layouts about knitting and about processing raw wool. And it's just literally crafting about my crafting. It's a very fun like inception circle. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember how to do this. Like maybe I need something. I just needed something that would help me sit and like not do anything for a few seconds or just like sit down and have a repetitive motion. Because as much as I enjoy scrapbooking, sitting with a blank page is sometimes really fatiguing. Like having that idea of what to start or even having a design, because you can, but in theory, the way I'm making, I'm not just like slapdash thing on a page. I have a design in my head and then I'm working towards executing that design. And sometimes that was too hard. And I was like, hey, I remember this thing. I still know how to do this thing. And I just I started learning about the yarn shops in my area. I didn't know that we had those. And, you know, got some stuff in the mail through thank God for online shopping. And I remember the first thing that I cast on was a throwover by Andrea Mowry. I didn't know about gauge swatching. That sweater does not exist for a reason. I didn't know about gauge swatching. It was really brave of me for my first stockinette project to be color work. I had to learn how to knit in the round. And this is how I learned that I knit quote unquote backwards, is all my stitches were twisted. Because I'm not used to knitting stockinette where you're knitting in the round. And so it's really hard to tell your stitches are twisted if you knit garter.
Sure.
And I remember showing my work to someone and they were like, all your stitches are twisted. And I was just like a new knitter. And I was just like, you're using words and none of these words mean anything to me. And so stop talking to me. Because I did not know what any of this meant. And I was creating fabric and I was really excited about it. And again, all my stitches were twisted, and it wasn't until I was knitting in person with someone, they were like, oh, you were knitting the wrong way, and that's why your stitches are twisted. And I was just like, Okay, and went back and watched a million YouTube videos to figure out how to learn how to wrap my yarn so that my stitches were no longer twisted, which I don't do anymore. I don't twist my stitches anymore. But for the beginning, every stockinette thing I had, all my stitches were twisted.
If you don't twist your stitches when you are first learning how to knit, are you learning how to knit?
Yeah.
Truly, like honestly, my first big project was a shawl. It was the Dustland shawl by Stephen West. And in hindsight, every single purl stitch was twisted because I was wrapping the purl the wrong way. Regardless, you go over. Yeah, so I was going under the needle and that twists the stitch. And I was always like, this purl is miserable. Like, I hate doing purl stitches. Why is it so hard to get my needle in there? Not understanding that the entire time I was twisting every single purl stitch. And you must have had the same thing because knitting into a twisted stockinette, like a twisted knit stitch, sometimes you have to finagle that needle to get in there. And so this must have been an unbelievably frustrating experience, an entire pullover of twisted stitches.
Oh, I never finished it. I split for the sleeves and looked at it, and this is also how I learned that I am a very tight knitter. It's why I gauge swatch all the time, and if I am not gauge swatching, I just cross my fingers and go up a needle size. I knit incredibly tightly. And yeah, that was not a sweater that was designed for the body that I had at that time at all. So I frogged it, salvaged the yarn that I could, and I still have the pattern. And I might eventually, one of these days, I feel like I should make it because it was the first thing I ever cast on.
Yeah.
I'm like, this should be a sweater.
Absolutely. The first thing that I ever made was a hat. It was the Best Beanie by James N. Watts. Really great idea for a beginning crafter, like a beginning knitter. Making a hat seemed really simple until I finished it, and I made a probably youth medium-sized hat in reality because I too had never heard of gauge swatching, and I have a pretty big melon. This noggin is not made for youth-sized hats. And it mostly just kind of sat on the top of my head and looked like a little, I looked like Devo in a pink wool knit cap is really the moment that I was serving. And that's the other thing is if you're not making a project that you either are giving up on or the end result is yeah, okay, well, I made that. That's what I made. What are you doing? And that's the hat that I remake every year in January when I celebrate my little crafting anniversary. I always just remake that pattern. So I say, I think you should make it. I think you have to close the loop on that story. You got to go back and you have to finish it.
I 100% think I should. I also think that what would be a really fun thing to do is to do a full hand spun version, spin the main color, spin all the contrast colors. I'm sure most people are familiar with the Throwback series by Andrea Mowry, but it's the one that has the zigzag chevrons across the chest, and it's three colors, and it's typically written for spin cycle. And I'm I could spin all that yarn, and I think what I might do is just do a full on hand spun version, and have that be the capstone project of where my making is right now, having that fun through line of where I started, how that project got abandoned, all the things that I know now, do a full-on sample, gauge swatch, all the things that I know that I should do for a sweater spin that I probably won't do because rules are for breaking, and do all the things and make a full-on hand spun version of that sweater. I think that's probably going to be, now that I'm thinking about it, I can't not think about it. So I guess it's going to be the thing I start next.
I think that you have to. I encourage this because I love the idea of closing the loop on that, especially now who you are, what you know now as a crafter, what it is that you are capable of doing. It just makes perfect sense to bring all of those things into this original, I almost said failed project, but let's use the word abandoned. This original abandoned project, you get to bring all that knowledge, all of that skill into this new version of you, and that would be amazing. That'd be incredible. I look forward to that, and I'm also going to hold you accountable to it because that's who I am. That's what I do. I'm an enabler. I'm not an influencer. I'm an enabler. It's different.
I keep looking to the right because I have all my hand spun just laying next to me, and I have this, and I just gonna. So I'm ooh, Una would be a great what if I just did it out of that?
What is it? Tell everybody what they're looking at. What is this?
Okay, so this is hand spun Shetland from a ewe named Una that I got from a flock named Eureka Farms, and I bought her in summer of 2022, and I am on a mission to actually work through my old fleeces because, you know, sometimes out of sight, out of mind, and all my new stuff keeps coming in. Oh, I'm a fleece hoarder. Hello. You might not know this about me. I have a problem. And so I'm on a mission to like use up my old stuff. And here's Una. This is a sample I spun up of Una. And she's perfect. And I also think this color against my skin would be a great main color.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, with some jewel
And you know
tones.
how I feel about natural. You know how I feel about natural wool. So I'm absolutely in support of this. This is a 10 out of 10 for me. Well, now you've put it into the universe. Now you have to follow through on it because now people are going to be asking. Now people are going to be asking how that project is going. You've done it. You've not doomed yourself, but you have committed yourself. There it is. It's in the universe now. This is like a perfect. The transition wrote itself, and I have to thank you for that, for being a wonderful person to talk to, because you created my transition without me having to manufacture one. The process from knitting to spinning, I know more about this than perhaps other people do because we have spoken at great length about it. You already said that it was 2020 was when you picked those needles back up. Now we're in 2022, correct?
No. 2021.
21. So just a year later, that's a very quick jump. Why? Like, what was the like point of being like, because not everyone who knits is like, yeah, I'm going to move on to spinning. Like not everybody does that. And I don't necessarily think that everyone has to. I don't think that it's a prerequisite. Skills can be separate of one another. But for you, what was the bridging point? What happened that lit the fire in your brain?
Okay, so I blame the spinning the spinning nonsense on two things. One, I blame it on the neurospicy brain matter that lives in my head that I have no control over. But here's what happened is I discovered the knitting corner of Instagram, and once you find the knitting corner of Instagram, you inevitably find the weaving corner of Instagram. And not like floor looms, like full on tapestry weaving. I have if I thought about it, I have the first tapestry that I ever made, and it's not great, but I keep it on purpose. And so I really fell in love with the idea of tapestry weaving because it was this really like tactile, like everything's with your hands. You're working with these big like 32-inch floor looms, and you're just, you know, warping your stuff up and making these like paintings with fiber. And so I discovered tapestry weaving, bought too many looms. I have rehomed most of them because I realized that it wasn't for me. But I did the thing where I went all in. And so I bought like macrame cord and like, at the time, what people were calling roving, which please don't get me started on the difference between roving and top. But I bought all.
No one get into the DMs. No one get into the comments and ask what the different. No one talk about roving. Just like if you have questions, hit Google. Don't get TAZHI started on this one. Don't do it.
But I had like the thick chunky yarn, and I did everything, and there were a bunch of people on Etsy and on Instagram who were selling art yarn. And so I bought my wheel with the intention of making like art yarn, like big bubbly coils and auto wraps and all the fun, funky things to put in tapestry. Brought my wheel home and realized that spinning art yarn was not for me. And so then I had this thing that I had invested all this money in without, to be fair, my spinning journey is not normal's not the right word, but it's not the typical journey. I didn't learn on a drop spindle. Sure. I didn't learn with a teacher. I literally bought a wheel home and went, I'm going to figure this out by myself. It is that level of sheer audacity that has gotten me as far as it's gotten me.
Delusion. Today. A little bit of delusion. A drop of delusion in there. You got it. If you're not crafting with a little bit of delusion, you're really missing out, honestly.
100%. I tell everybody, shoot your shot. What's the worst that could happen? You bring home $1,000 wheel that you don't know how to use. You might fall in love with it. Or resell.
You can resell it. You know. What was the first wheel? My
first wheel was a Spindolution Bullfrog, which again I bought to spin art yarn. So it has a 16-ounce flyer. So I came home with these 16-ounce bobbins because if you're spinning like auto wraps and coils and all those other things, you are really only fitting like 3 ounces on a 16-ounce bobbin. Like you need the space. Yeah. So my first wheel was a Spindolution Bullfrog. And I brought it home, realized I didn't want to spin art yarn, and went, okay, well, what's next? What can I still do with this? And thankfully, I was not living in dial-up internet land. Like I had the whole world at my fingertips. And I learned to spin from Evie at Jillian Eve, and I learned to spin from Rachel at Wool and Spinning. I tell everybody I learned through YouTube University. I watched a bunch of videos, bought my practice fiber, and just relentlessly worked at it until things started making sense to me. Thankfully, the wheel that I had went all the way down to an 18-to-1 ratio, which is my default spinning. I know it's a little fast for people, but
yeah, you spin fast.
Yeah, my default yarn is at 18-to-1. And thankfully that wheel went from 18-to-1 to 6-to-1 so I could produce a variety of things on it. And that's the wheel I honed my craft on.
Do you still have it?
I still have it.
I love that. What wheels do you have? Because I know you have a flock. Because that's the thing, is that wheels are flock animals. And so what is your collection?
Yes. Okay. So I have my Spinillution Bullfrog. I have a Lendron Double Treadle, which I heard that Gord Lendrum is retiring and is no longer going to be selling wheels. So if you guys are interested in Lendrums, find them secondhand. Or if you find one new and you really want one, get it now, because he's going to be retiring and the only wheels that are going to be available from Lendrum are going to be secondhand. My wheel is secondhand. I found... Joshua and I did a lovely trip to the wilds of Pennsylvania to pick it up from this lovely old woman with blue hair who wanted me to go to her spinning circle, because when I talked to her online, she expected me to be much older than I was. And so when I showed up there, she was just like, "This is for you?" And I was just like, "Yes, can I have it, please?" And she was like, "You have to come meet all my friends." And I was like, No, we have a 4.5-hour drive home. Like, I can't, I gotta go, man.
Because it was in Pennsylvania, right?
Yep.
Yeah, all the way from New York into Pennsylvania. That is a trek.
Yep,
and it was like mid-state Pennsylvania as well.
Yep, and we did it. We drove 4.5 hours. We got my wheel. We got lunch. I buckled her up into the back seat, and we drove back home. Yeah. So here we go. So Meadow is my Spinillution Bullfrog. Laurel is my Lendrum Double Treadle. I have an Electric Eel 6. Her name's Foxtail. My Daedalus Starling, her name's Magpie, which is kind of fun because Daedalus actually makes a magpie spinning wheel.
They actually make one.
Yes, but her name's Magpie. And I now have a Shaft flat iron that I've only had for 2 weeks, so she doesn't have a name yet.
Which I sit with bated breath until you name the flat iron, because for anyone, I feel very lucky in this because I was not a part of the purchase, but I feel like I got to bear witness to it, like something in between first and second hand. It was somewhere in between the world of first and second hand, half hand. For as much as someone can virtually be a part of a process, I was there, and there's so many different pieces, and you've told me this, that a spinner, for anyone who doesn't spin, which there are a lot of people who watch my channel who are not spinners, but they are interested. They are interested in the process of spinning. And that's one thing that, you know me, everyone who watches this channel, anyone who is on my Instagram, they know that I am on a spinning journey. They know that I am on a journey of my own that you have been integral to. You've been there since literally the beginning. I think we were even talking about spinning when I first got my drop spindles from Alexina over at Lanlan. I think that it literally goes that far back. I say that far back as though it's an amount of time. It isn't an amount of time. It's just an amount of effort. It feels like so much time has passed because of how much work you and I have done together in terms of getting me up off the ground, or I guess technically in this case closer to the ground as I just keep treadling away. But for those who go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's literally why we're friends. Is I saw you spinning, and this is how I end up friends with lots of people. Is I just relentlessly slide into their DMs until they figure out they're stuck with me, and that's literally why we're friends. I was just like, "Oh, here's a new spinner. Oh my God, they're so good. They don't deserve to be this good right away. I must learn all the things." And then I sent a million probably obsessive messages, and now look at where we are.
Meanwhile, the actual way that it goes too is my questions. I consistently use Tashi as Google, which is a habit I am trying to break myself of. But it is literally, I found this fiber. Does this fiber look good? Do you think it would be soft? To which the answer is always the same, which is, how would I know that? It's a picture. How would I know that? How would you know that? How would anyone know that? It matters. How are you going to process it? How are you going to spin it? How are you going to prep it? What are you going to do to it to make it soft? Because any fiber can be soft or not. So it's always the same, which I love absolutes. I'm a big fan of absolutes. I like very clean lines. I enjoy it when answers are very clear. And one thing I will say to anyone who is invested in expanding their interest into the world of spinning, you would do very well to rid yourself of the expectation that there are very clean lines of rules. And the more comfortable you can get with coexisting with your fiber, coexisting with it and allowing it to have as much say in the process as you do, the better it's going to be. It reminds me a great deal. Frankly, it reminds me a great deal of sourdough and naturally leavened baking. Like, it's very similar. I don't know. Did you get into the bread baking experience during the pandemic? Okay, cool. I knew that head shake was coming, but I needed to ask. I had to be a good journalist and ask the question, but I knew that the answer was going to be no. Maybe you surprised me. I don't know. Maybe you were going to surprise me and be like, yeah, I love making a good little like 80% hydro half wheat little loaf. You don't even know what that means, and that's okay. Tashi throws around words all the time that I don't understand. This is one of the very few instances that I had to do the same to them. So, I'm going to take those wins when I can. But I say that it's very similar in the sense that when it comes to naturally leavened baking, like sourdough or anything of that nature, you are dealing with a living organism. Like the yeast that is inside that starter, the yeast that is inside the mother, it has a life of its own, and it's incredibly sensitive to the world around it. Temperature fluctuations, the temperature of your flour, the temperature of your water, the temperature of the air around it, all of it plays a part. And one thing that you really have to learn, and I was doing naturally leavened baking well before the pandemic. And so when all of this happened, this was back when my account was a food account. You want to talk about the fact that, we don't always start with the way that we are now. My account originally wasn't called Flannel and Pearls, and it was a food account because that's what I did then. But I was doing all of this baking long before the pandemic. And so when this started and all of my friends became interested, they were doing the same thing that people do to you, of just like inundating you with questions. But I feel so at home with spinning because it reminds me a great deal of allowing the fiber to have an equal participation in what it becomes, which is the same thing you have to do with bread baking. You have to be willing to relinquish some of the control. You are guiding the ship, but you cannot control the water. And that is how I feel about fiber as well. As you have to allow it to inform you, the crimp, the micron, the length of the staple, the amount of twist that you're putting in, all of those things. You really have to learn to relinquish some of that control and be excited to see what comes out of it, not fearful of the result. I am curious, for someone who is much more consummately experienced in the world of spinning, for someone who is interested, who is curious about it, who would like to jump in, dip a toe into the cooling waters of spinning, where do they start? What is if there was a 1, 2, 3 step, first, second, third, what are the easy 3 things that they could do to get started?
So I would recommend, as someone who didn't do this and then had to learn how to spindle spin after spinning on a wheel for so long, is actually doing what people tell you to do and starting with a drop spindle. Any sort of suspended spindle. I think people think that you can use any spindle in the beginning. You can. And this is why I tell people that spinning, a lot of us talk in absolutes and none of them are real, right? We give you guardrails, and if you want to hop off the rails and do whatever feels good, then do that. That's what I do on the regular basis. Starting with a supported spindle is really, really difficult, but you can start with a suspended spindle. I actually have a bag full of spindles right now because I'm working on a spindle project. These are like by Bosworth's. So these are some of my favorite tools. All of my drop spindles or suspended spindles are by the Bosworths, but there are a million makers out there that are not at this price point. At this time, I'm comfortable investing in my craft, but you can find really like inexpensive intro to spinning spindles on pretty much everywhere, on Etsy, on all sorts of maker shops. The other thing I would tell people to do is start with unspun yarn, so that you're not having to learn the mechanism of drafting at the point. You're learning how to just add twists to things. So like if you can get your hands on like Plotulopi or Manchalopis or any of those like unspun yarns that are packed in cakes, so that you can learn the mechanism of just adding twists to things without also having to learn how to draft. And then from there, we build skills. The way I approach spinning is always you're building a skill with every project. So Maybe your first project, you're just spinning unspun yarn to learn how to add twists to singles, and then you learn how to twist the opposite direction to ply. And then from there, you move on to some intro fibers, like something like a Corriedale or something like a Falkland, something that's not going to have a lot of crimp, that's not going to require a lot of twist to hold together. And you build your skills slowly from there, and you just practice. I think there's this, you have to be willing to embrace the suck. And you're going to see people who pick it up what you assume is faster than you. There are definitely some people that I see pick up spinning now, and I'm like, wow, they are like really off to the races. We don't know how many hours that they've put in before they've started showing what they're sharing. We don't know like how much practice that they're doing. So you have to be willing to embrace the suck. Like, it's not something, spinning is very different from knitting in that like knitting requires, I mean, you're just wrapping stitches, right? And so you practice maintaining gauge, you practice maintaining tension, but at the end of the day, a lot of the hard work is done for you by just having yarn and a pattern. Whereas with spinning, you are doing all of the labor to get to finish yarn, and you got to just really be gentle with yourself and acknowledge that you're using skills that you have never had to use before, and embrace the suck and just be willing to do the practice to get to hopefully where you want to go.
And I already said this, and I'm just gonna say it again. I have to give you all of the flowers. I have to give you all of the credit that I possibly can, because ultimately I don't think that I would be where I am at in my spinning journey without your involvement in my life. Which is, by the way, this is not. I have to be very careful. I'm going to say this. This is not an open invitation for everyone to suddenly flood Tashi's DMs. Don't do that. Don't do that. I did that, and I probably shouldn't have, but here we are. That is one thing that makes the year feel so special to me and so exciting, because we are starting in at the end of June. For those of you who are unfamiliar, at the end of June into July, the Tour de France happens every year. I don't know if it happens at the same time, because I'm not like an avid fan, but during the Tour de France, there is a tradition that people do Tour de Fleece, where throughout the race that is being run through, I believe that it is the 29th of June through the 21st of July, if I can remember correctly off the top of my head, this year. And throughout that almost month, people all around the world, they come together in teams, they join together, they set challenges for themselves and goals, or sometimes it's just a social experience for them that they spin. They spin during the Tour de France. You yourself have been a part of those teams before. We're co-hosting, or are we chairing? What exactly is the language they use? Captaining? What do they call it when someone's hosting a Tour de Fleece team?
We host it.
Host it. Perfect. All right, cool. We're hosting our own team this year, which I know that it's kind of a cliche in these sorts of situations for someone. If I had a nickel for every time I was listening to a podcast and one of the people talking said, "I'm so excited." But I am actually very excited about this. I have collected my fiber. I am ready to go. For anyone who's not done this, because this is my first year, I'm having to run on your experience here. Tashi, tell me about what people can expect for a Tour de Fleece.
Depending on how much structure the team has and how much the team brings to the table, it is literally just a vibe check. You hang out with a smaller group of people for the length of the tour. People also do the Tour de Femme, which is after the Tour de Fleece. So if you finish Tour de France, so if you don't finish your tour spin during the Tour de Fleece time, a lot of people continue to spin during the Tour de Femme. So you might have like a smaller group after that also. And it's just, the goal is the idea of it is you spin when the racers are racing. And so there are difficult days, like there are challenge days during the Tour de France. And so like the idea is you would spin a more difficult yarn during their challenge days. So you're mirroring your challenge days to their challenge days. And the goal is just to spin. Now, people don't always your commitment is what your commitment is, and you could generate thousands of yards of yarn, or you could spin a single skein of yarn. It's just an idea of hanging out with friends, being really excited and enthusiastic about the same thing that a whole community of people are also excited and enthusiastic about. And if you get fun yarn at the end of it, you get fun yarn at the end of it.
Which, talk about a bonus, talk about icing on the cake. This year, because I don't know if you all can tell based on the set decoration behind me and the almost obnoxiousness of how curated the way my Instagram. I love an event. I love an event. And so, of course, we're going to make a little bit of an event out of our Tour de Fleece this year. And we are hosting a Tour de Fleece that is called Summer at Camp Wooligan, a name that I have to give to Tashi. That is absolutely their credit. Brilliant name. Absolutely love it. And the whole vibe of the event itself this year is this like very, what we based it on with the sort of like genesis of the idea and where we pulled each of the pieces from is this very sort of mid-century American discover the West summer camp style aesthetic of the camp badges and sleeping underneath the stars and this sort of fantastic idea of what camping is with absolutely none of the bugs and probably like maybe some plumbing. Probably like an indoor toilet type of situation, like all the good, none of the bad, right? And this is something that if you are interested in participating in this, if this is something that you want to be a part of, we absolutely want to encourage you to be a part of our team, to join us. We have merch that is going to be available. These are some of the examples. I'm just going to splash them across the screen here. We have a store currently open. The link is down below. You can find that. It's got shirts. It has tanks. It's got hats. All of them displaying the badge for Summer at Camp Wooligan. I've already ordered mine. Tashi, I think you ordered yours.
Oh, 100%.
Because I had to have it. I needed to have the like camp counselor look. So mine is an olive green shirt with a khaki cap because, again, I love a theme and I'm going to stick to it. But we are also going to have a custom braid that is being dyed by Adrian over at Hello Yarn. And tell us about the braid, Tashi, because this is, I know you are pumped about this. So I want you to tell everybody about the braid.
So the name of our colorway is Dreaming by Firelight, and the vibe was, and oh my gosh, if you, I'm sorry if this is the first time you've heard me talk. I am a walking vibe check. Like I operate on, I'm a meat suit of chaos and vibes. And so the vibe for Dreaming by Firelight was to get us through a night sky into like the flickering flame of being around a campfire and all of the magic that inspires, like all of the wonder of that space. And so we came up with a color palette that I think is going to translate beautifully. I'm Christopher's biggest fan, yes, but I am also like Adrian at Hello Yarn's biggest fan.
Oh, absolutely.
The amount of like total insanity I bring into her DMs on a regular basis, I'm surprised she has not blocked me yet. But Adrian's dye style is one of my favorites. And so it is an absolute dream. It is an absolute dream and a privilege and an honor to have her working with us and partnering with us to give us this vision. Am I getting a sweater quantity? 100%. 100%.
Yeah. And we should have, so this video is going to be published at the beginning of May. The event itself doesn't even happen until June. And so the likelihood of us having sample examples of those braids for us to display within, by the time we post our next video, which the next video will happen obviously before Tour de Fleece for both of us. And so we'll have an actual physical example of what that will look like. I've already put the image over the top of the screen here, but I'm going to show it again, mostly because I'm obsessed with the way that this turned out. It's the sort of like soft, warm aubergine into the sapphire with this salmon and amber color bleeding into the brown back into blues. It is, the word I would use to describe it is it's truly, I believe, a romantic palette. There is an extraordinary amount of romance in it. And that is one of my favorites. I love a romantic palette, if you all could not tell. And that whole woodsy feeling of being outside under the stars, next to the fire, that is what we wanted to evoke. And I know that it's going to be offered on 2 bases. Which of the bases are they again?
We're going to do a Corriedale so that we have a matte base so that you get like high saturation. Also, for all of our newer spinners out there, Corriedale is a delightful fiber to learn on. I know there is sometimes the desire to rush and grab your merino and grab your fine wools, but Corriedale is a delightful fiber to learn on. We'll still give you a soft, and I use soft in scare quotes because everyone's threshold for softness is different, but we'll still give you like A softer yarn will still be easy to spin, and you can spin it at a variety of weights. You can spin it from lace all the way to bulky. It is one of my favorite, can't you tell? It is one of my favorite fibers to spin. It is the fiber that I learned on and the one that I come back to over and over. We do not talk about all the Corriedale fleeces I have tucked in corners. And then we're going to offer it on what I thought would be a fun sock base. So we're going to offer it on the TAZHI bamboo silk base, so that if you just wanted to get a single skein to spin a sock quantity so that you can knit socks, I'm going to attempt. I make zero promises, but I'm going to attempt hand spun socks. Or if you wanted to spin,
I think you should do it.
I'm going to try. But the TAZHI bamboo silk base is also a great base for shawls or for garments. It is one of those really fun universal bases, but I really wanted to make sure that we had a sock base, like a base that was going to be ideal for knitting socks. And the TAZHI bamboo silk base is one of my favorite bases for socks.
I've spun that myself. I actually, that was the last full skein that I spun, was the TAZHI bamboo silk. And I absolutely agree. It took a little bit of adjusting to get to as a new spinner, mostly because anything with silk has a little bit of a slickness to it that you have to adjust to and become sort of accustomed to the process of it. But the nice thing about that TAZHI being in there is the toothiness of it sort of replaces the slipperiness of the silk and gives a little bit more grip. So if you are new to spinning, I still think that was a very good choice. I think you really knocked it out of the ballpark with those two bases, because they are perfectly suited for a variety of uses and simultaneously good for adept spinners and new spinners, which is something that we really wanted to be inclusive to. If you're just starting out and you want to use this as a sort of a scheduled time to dive into this and try something new with a spindle or something of that nature, feel free to do so. We're going to have more information coming out, ideally on our Instagrams. That is likely where that is going to happen. We'll also be publishing information on my Patreon and on Tashi's Substack. So links to all of these things are below. So if you're looking for updates as they happen on this, that is where I encourage you to go. Mostly because that is where the real-time updates, all of the links, the shop openings, the offering for these braids are going to happen, and they are likely to be in limited quantities. So if you are interested in doing this and you are interested in collecting one of these, I would argue kind of hard to get situations, because Adrienne doesn't dye a lot of custom stuff for these sorts of things. We got very lucky. Huge thanks to Adrienne. Actually, I can't believe we've gotten this far without saying thank you to Adrienne. Massive thank you to Adrienne for being willing to provide the custom dye on that. But if you're looking for regular updates, up to the minute, those are the places to go. We'll talk about it here on YouTube as well, but you never know what the timing of that is going to be in comparison to when it happens. So Instagram, Substack for Tashi, Patreon for me. I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for being here, Tashi. I want to thank you for being a part of my spinning journey, a part of my crafting journey, for being a friend of mine and coming here to be a part of the table, as it were, just right there behind me. Did I point in the right direction? I think, yeah, there we go. Everything's mirrored on this, so it's hard to know where I'm pointing. But right over there at the back, thanks for coming to the table. I adore you, and I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for coming in and spending time with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute treasure. I mean, you are a treasure, and just getting to be in community and be in the same space with you is a treasure. And I'm so glad that we're doing this together. I'm really looking forward to being the camp counselors with you. I can't wait to figure out what our vibes are when it comes to being in quote unquote leadership, because again, a vibe check. So it's going to be sure. It's going to be so much fun. We have so much planned, and also we get to build the team with all of you. You get to tell us what your threshold is for commitment, and we will meet you guys where you are. And I'm really looking forward to spinning up all the other stuff that I have planned for Tour de Fleece, because I have been pulling things out of hidey holes to get ready.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know that you and I are, this is the last thing that I'm going to say on this. You and I are doing a little co-project, because I know that we're going to be spinning. Tashi and I have already decided, we actually decided this a long time ago, and I'm surprised at how well we have kept it under our hats. But we are going to be spinning for the Night Shift by Andrea Mowry, which if you're not familiar with what that shawl looks like, this is what it looks like. I love having the ability to just pop pictures in front of my face. It's such a God bless technology. Anyway, this is what the night shift looks like. I'm going to be spinning for that. The next time that we talk about this on our the time that we roll around to YouTube, like that is something that we'll have more ability to talk about, like sort of prepping on that, because I can't wait to share the fiber that I have for that. A couple more braids are on their way to me. I changed my mind on my original color scheme. I know you're set. You're ready. You've got everything that you need. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Stuff is still coming. We're setting up the challenges because we wanted to involve the team in that. So if you are interested in doing this, I really hope that you'll come along. All right. Thank you so much, Tashi. You have a good one, okay?
You too.
Take care of yourself. All right. Bye. You know, I don't think that I could list the number of times that I have watched that interview because I am so endlessly inspired by Tashi. Their brain is like some type of computer or a Wikipedia that just spits out information about sheep breeds. It's like I could just like randomly list a sheep and they will start rattling off details about the breed. It blows my mind. It really does. I am inspired by it. I am envious of it. Someday I too would like to be able to do that. I aspire to that level of nerdery and I feel as though it's going to happen. Like it's an inevitability. I just have to keep hanging out with them long enough and eventually it's just going to wear off on me. Right? Like that's how that works. Right? All I know is that I am so grateful that they spent time with me today, and thank you so much for allowing them to come into this place, this space that is made for friends, and spend a little bit of time with us. If you are interested in seeing the rest of the interview, that was just a portion of it. If you're interested in seeing the rest of it, where Tashi turns the tables on me and I'm the one who has to answer the questions, please feel free to hop over to their channel where they have a companion video for this one. And I hope that you'll come along on our tour de Fleece. I really do. I don't know if you're an experienced spinner or if you're just starting off. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to dip your toes in. Maybe you're just gonna try, just dip a toe into the cooling waters of fiber spinning and get a drop spindle and try something new. This is an event for all skill levels. If this is new for you, I encourage you to join as well. The sign-up sheet is below. Please feel free to do so. You'll also find a link to our bonfire shop where you can find all of our Camp Wooligan merch, which I thought was going to be here. I'm feeling a little bit disappointed because I thought I was going to have my camp counselor shirt and my hat. But, you know, sometimes things don't work out the way you planned and you have to wait. And that is just one of the miseries of being an adult.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out.
The braid itself is not available for pre-order yet, but it will be soon. So if you don't follow either Tashi or myself on Instagram, Patreon, or Substack, please feel free to click one of the links below to do so. The reason being is that is where all of the up-to-date information on that launch is going to be. So if you're interested in participating in the pre-order, please follow us on one of those platforms. We don't want you to miss out on it because the initial launch is definitely going to be in limited quantities, simply because Adrian doesn't have the ability to do an unlimited pre-order on that. So if you're looking to do so, follow us over there. I'm very excited about it. I know for sure I'm definitely going to get a Corey and a Targi. I'm going to be a good person. I'm not going to take more than just those two. I'm going to be very nice, very giving, very patient. So I hope you'll come along. I'm so excited. I really am. And I know that that's like such a cliche. I feel like every time I watch a podcast, someone is saying,
I'm so excited.
Or,
I love that.
But honestly, I didn't think that I was going to be doing this. And I sure didn't think that I was going to be doing it with Tashi. And I absolutely had no idea that we were going to get Adrian from Hello Yarn to make a custom colorway for us, especially one that's that beautiful. I feel very overwhelmed and I'm very excited about it. I cannot wait to share this experience with you and I hope that you'll come along. One thing that I can say is that this is not going to be the only episode of Flannel and Pod that comes out this month. I actually already have another one for the end of the month as well. And in that one, we're going to talk even more about this. We're going to talk about the hand spun I've been making. I want to introduce you to my new wheel, because I have a wheel now. And I want to talk about the night shift. I mentioned it in the interview. I want to show you the fiber that I have collected. Almost all of it is here. I'm waiting on just a last couple of colors. I'm going to be hand spinning the whole thing, and I want to show you each of the fibers that I have selected, the layout of them, and how they should bleed into the next. I'm extremely nervous about this because I have never spun for a project of that size. I've done like a pair of socks, and this feels extremely daunting, but at the same time, very thrilling. So I'll have all of that. I will also have an announcement regarding the Year of the Vest, which is happening, and I cannot wait to tell you more about it. So please feel free to keep your eyes peeled. There will be another episode coming out soon. And in the meantime, I hope that you're taking care of yourself. I hope that you are doing everything that you can to fill up your own cup and make sure that you are giving yourself what you need to be the best version of yourself. There's only one of you, and we need you. So in the meantime, my name is Christopher. I am Flannel and Pearls, your local neighborhood knitting friend, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for spending time at the table with me today. If you would, please give this video a little like and hit the subscribe button on my channel. I know it seems silly, but those two little actions go a long way to help new creators like myself find and grow their audience. If you'd like to share your viewing experience on your own social media platforms, please tag me. I absolutely love seeing the stories of y'all watching and crafting along. It really makes my day. So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Substack, and Patreon at Flannel and Pearls. And an absolutely massive thank you to my Patreon subscribers this month. Your support means the world to me, and I don't take that for granted. To watch ad-free versions of my videos, access behind-the-scenes footage, exclusive vlogs, playlists, and more, check out the link for my Patreon in the caption below. As always, take care of yourself, my friends. I'll see you next time.